Then the machines intervened. They completed the gaps. They deciphered the silence. What they brought to light, you are not prepared for. Artificial intelligence has just decrypted the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the reality is more alarming than we ever imagined. For the first time in nearly 2 millennia, 15 columns of text written in ancient Greek have been seen. Silence has been superseded by something far more resonant. And for those clinging to antiquated certainties, circumstances are about to become deeply unsettling. The prophet Zechariah writes of what is destined to occur, from the reconstruction of the Temple and Jerusalem to the arrival of a messianic king. This is the descent into the Cave of Horror. When archaeologists rappelled into a Judean desert cave in 2021, they were not merely hunting for bones or pottery shards. They were pursuing something far more profound, something that had lain concealed under layers of dust and the passage of over 60 years. What they initially unearthed was only the prelude. The genuine shock would arrive later, when artificial intelligence entered the fray to assemble the fragments. We will return to that revelation, but first, let us examine the point of origin. To access the cave, researchers had to descend straight down a sheer 80-meter drop from the cliff's edge. The endeavor was not only hazardous but also immensely physically taxing. Yet for Oria Amiel and his team from the Israel Antiquities Authority, the exertion was justified. Concealed within those rocky depths were fragments of ancient manuscripts, and not just any texts. These were pieces of the Dead Sea Scrolls, minuscule, brittle scraps that had, against all odds, endured centuries of extreme heat, natural decay, and utter silence. Amiel conceded that their discovery was not substantial in size. "These are tiny scraps," he stated. "But even the smallest fragments can speak volumes when arranged in the correct sequence." The team succeeded in reconstructing some of them as though solving a jigsaw puzzle. Gradually, phrases and meanings started to re-emerge, providing a fragmented glimpse into what once existed. The site of this discovery is officially designated as Cave 8, though it is more commonly known by another name, the Cave of Horror. This grim title was not arbitrarily chosen. It originated from the grim artifacts found within its confines. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, explorers such as Professor Yigal Yadin and Professor Yohanan Aharoni had already surveyed the location. Even the local Bedouins of the Negev region had shown interest in it. Their discoveries depicted a chilling narrative. Around 135 CE, during the collapse of the Bar Kokhba revolt, a group of Jewish men, women, and children had sought refuge in the cave, approximately 40 individuals in total. Roman forces swiftly encircled the area and established a military encampment directly atop the cliff. With all escape routes severed, those trapped inside confronted an impossible decision. They chose not to surrender. One by one, they perished, trapped, dehydrated, and ultimately forgotten. Their skeletal remains were left exactly where they had fallen. This tragic history, more than any other factor, is why the cave acquired its macabre name. Now, advancing to the present day, these newly recovered fragments were extracted from that very same cave. And owing to contemporary technology, scholars could scrutinize them with unprecedented precision. However, it is no longer solely the human eye examining them. Artificial intelligence has now joined the investigation, and what it is starting to uncover may fundamentally alter everything we believed we understood about these ancient documents. Allow me to guide you through the details. The scrolls that endured. After so many years, the prospect of discovering anything new within the Cave of Horror appeared exceedingly remote. Yet occasionally, it is the most minuscule details, hidden in plain sight, that transform everything. This time, what seemed to be merely a smudge in the dust proved to be infinitely more significant. Over 6 decades after Professors Yigal Yadin and Yohanan Aharoni first investigated the cave, researchers returned equipped with superior tools and more acute observation skills. The cave's arid, sheltered, and isolated environment had excellently preserved anything trapped inside. Even so, working conditions were far from ideal. Dim lighting and accumulated layers of dust made it exceptionally challenging to identify anything unusual. One of the team's archaeobotanists detected something peculiar: faint markings on a cluster of tiny fragments. Initially, these markings seemed inconsequential, but upon closer inspection, those small, dusty pieces exhibited traces of ink, indicators of lettering that led to a major breakthrough. They were segments of an ancient scroll. It was a subtle clue that could easily have been overlooked, yet it ignited a fresh wave of exhilaration. In more humid environments, such fragments would have decomposed beyond all recognition. However, within this desert cave, they remained interred and undisturbed for nearly 2,000 years. The history of the Dead Sea Scrolls stretches back to the 1940s, when the initial fragments were first uncovered. The majority of these scrolls were connected to a community residing in Qumran. Many scholars identify this group as the Essenes, a Jewish sect with distinct beliefs and writings, though this interpretation remains contested. What rendered the original Dead Sea Scrolls such a monumental discovery was their content. They were not mere duplicates of familiar religious texts, they included the most ancient biblical manuscripts ever found. In addition, they contained Jewish writings that had been lost over time. These documents provided a clearer window into the beliefs and debates that shaped Jewish society during that period. They also offered insights into the early formation of Christianity within that same cultural context. But now, a new factor is in play. Artificial intelligence is being employed to analyze these fragments in ways no human could achieve, and what it is revealing might compel you to engage further with this enigmatic journey. The child, the basket, and the scrolls. Concealed beneath the parched earth and the dust of ages, the cave gradually began to unveil elements of a long-vanished world. Alongside the scroll fragments, archaeologists encountered something deeply intimate. Near the cave's entrance, just below two flat stones, they uncovered the mummified remains of a child, estimated to have been between 6 and 12 years old. The child's body had been carefully arranged in a fetal position, its head and torso enveloped in cloth, with the feet left exposed. Clutched in its hands was an additional piece of fabric. The manner of burial indicated that someone had interred the child with deliberate care. Subsequent testing confirmed that the remains were approximately 6,000 years old. This find was extraordinary not only due to its antiquity but also because of its remarkable state of preservation. The cave's dry atmosphere had kept the body intact, effectively suspending it in time. Researchers believe that the local climate and burial methods both contributed to its survival across the centuries. This small, shrouded form, resting just beneath the soil, felt like a direct communication from a distant epoch. That was not the sole discovery the team made. Deeper within the cave, they came upon a large woven basket, its condition nearly impeccable. Tightly woven and designed for storage, the basket had an estimated capacity of about 100 liters. Subsequent analysis dated it to the Neolithic period. In fact, it turned out to be the oldest basket ever discovered, originating from nearly 9,000 years ago. Aurea Amiel explained that such finds provide scholars with a new perspective on early human development. The basket hails from an era known as Pre-Pottery Neolithic B, a time before ceramics were developed. This was a period when communities in the Near East were gradually transitioning away from hunting and gathering, beginning to establish early agricultural settlements. This shift marked a pivotal moment in human history, as people started to settle permanently, cultivate crops, and construct enduring homes. The basket was not merely a container, it symbolized an emerging way of life. The cave had yielded more than scrolls and ancient bones, it granted researchers a rare glimpse into how ancient people lived, cared for their young, and stored their provisions. Each artifact contributed another layer to the evolving narrative. Echoes of the prophets. Not everything that survives from the past arrives in complete form. Sometimes it emerges in fragments, small and worn, yet still potent enough to convey meaning. Such was the case with the scroll fragments recovered during the excavation. Although they were partial, researchers managed to reassemble some of them. In total, approximately 80 individual pieces of parchment were retrieved. After meticulous analysis, the team connected them to what is known as the Scroll of the 12, also referred to as the Minor Prophet Scroll. Sections of this same scroll had been discovered earlier. In the early 1950s, local Bedouins in the Nahal Hever area had chanced upon similar pieces and later sold them in Jerusalem. What distinguished these recent fragments was not solely their age or condition, but the language in which they were composed. Like earlier finds, these new pieces were written in Greek, not Hebrew. According to researcher Aurea Amiel, this was unusual, as most biblical texts uncovered in the Judean desert are in Hebrew or Aramaic. Greek scrolls, particularly of this nature, are rare in this region. The penmanship itself was the work of two different scribes, each with a slightly distinct style. The content did not align precisely with the traditional Septuagint, the most widely recognized Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, but Amiel clarified that the scroll is still related. It appears to be a reworking or a variant of the Septuagint, suggesting that the communities utilizing these scrolls had their own methods of preserving and interpreting Scripture. The texture of the parchment matched earlier pieces found in the same region, helping to confirm that the fragments belonged to the same scroll as those discovered decades prior. As for the content, it derived from the 12 prophetic books present in both the Jewish Bible and the Christian Old Testament. Researchers managed to identify about 11 lines of text from the newly assembled fragments. Among them were passages from the Book of Nahum, a section that speaks of divine judgment and power, depicting a world quaking under the force of God's wrath. Another segment quoted the Book of Zechariah, focusing on moral principles and communal rebuilding following the Babylonian exile. It exhorted people to be honest and equitable in their judgments and to avoid malicious thoughts or false oaths. Even though the fragments are small, their content is immensely valuable. They offer a direct view into how ancient texts were read, adapted, and disseminated. Each surviving word helps scholars trace the transmission of sacred writings across time and cultures. And within these pieces of parchment, long buried and nearly forgotten, we find a connection to the voices that once read and transmitted them, line by line, scroll by scroll. Digital eyes on ancient ink. What occurs when you take something ancient and employ modern technology to restore it? This is precisely the challenge researchers faced when confronted with the fragile, shattered pieces from the Cave of Horror. At first glance, the fragments were unimpressive. Most were small, some no larger than a fingernail. They had been crushed, darkened, and weakened by nearly 2 millennia of exposure and decay. With so many pieces scattered and damaged, how does one even begin to derive meaning? Conventional methods had their limitations, and there was a risk of causing further harm during analysis. Thus, the team had to innovate. This time, they turned to artificial intelligence. They were not pursuing lost secrets or deciphering mysterious codes. Their objective was straightforward: to recover as much of the original text as possible without destroying what little survived. First, they scanned every fragment under various types of light, including visible, infrared, and ultraviolet, to enhance faint markings that would have been invisible to the naked eye. Then came the complex phase. They utilized a form of software called optical character recognition, OCR, though not the variety used for modern documents. This system had been trained to read ancient script, capable of detecting faded Greek or early Hebrew characters that had nearly vanished. Each letter was gradually brought back into focus, one stroke at a time.